and welcome to 15 Minutes in Canberra. I'm Hayley Channer, a Senior Policy Fellow at the Perth US Asia Centre. I am delighted to be joined by Mercedes Page, a good friend of mine, and on a very auspicious day, International Women's Day 2021. We're very lucky because Mercedes Page is a very accomplished woman herself. In 2018, she was named by the Financial Review and Qantas as one of Australia's 100 Women of Influence. And in 2019, she was a finalist in the Women's Agenda Leadership Awards. In addition to her recognition as being an amazing woman, Mercedes is also the founder and CEO of Young Australians in International Affairs. And I'm delighted to say she joins me now. Mercedes, welcome.
Thanks, Hayley.
So, for people who don't know how wonderful and amazing and talented you are, why don't you give us a little overview of your life this far?
Sure. Well, thank you for that very generous introduction. So my life so far. So I grew up in South Australia, so I'm a proud Adelaidean, but I've lived in Canberra now for the last six years. So I currently work for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, where I am the Assistant Director for Cyber Corporation. In addition, as you mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Young Australians in International Affairs, which is a not-for-profit aimed at providing a platform for Australia's next generation of leaders in international affairs to build their leadership skills so that we can navigate the challenges that Australia faces in the Indo-Pacific century.
You know, when you started Young Australians in International Affairs, when you start something from the ground up, there's a lot of work involved. What made you decide to take the plunge into creating an organisation from scratch for Young Australians?
So when I started the organisation, I was 23. I was at the University of Adelaide, where I was studying my master's degree, and I was in my final semester and writing my thesis. And at the time, I saw such a gap in the Australian landscape for an organisation, run by young people for young people to engage in international affairs, make really important connections with each other, but also with established leaders across the spectrum of international affairs. And so, there was this opportunity, and I thought, well, why not start something and fill that gap? So I did, and I started with a very professional Gmail account and a Facebook page, putting a call out.
Have to start somewhere.
Putting a call out for volunteers, and I started posting jobs, internships, and a range of other opportunities as well. And the organisation just exploded. Within, days, I had, thousands of people that were following the organisation and that were reaching out about opportunities to get engaged in their different states and territories. So the organisation actually grew really, really quickly. So I started in Adelaide, where I'm based, and that's where we had our first event. But we very quickly grew to branches in Melbourne, Sydney, Perth and Brisbane. And then in later years, we opened up a branch in Canberra as well.
It's amazing how you saw an opportunity because there was nothing else filling that gap. And it's true, it's very difficult for people who are young to break into international affairs, especially if they haven't had any role model or people that they know that are in the field. So I'm not surprised you were inundated with interest from people. So Young Australians in International Affairs has been going for 7 years now, which is an amazing achievement in itself for something that is a completely volunteer organisation. What are some of the major achievements of Young Oz?
Wow, major achievements. That's actually a really good question, and one that I should be able to answer really easily.
Other than providing a forum for young Australians to engage and, information and events.
Yeah. I think the biggest achievement, at least from my end, has just being able to see the impact that the organisation has for so many young Australians, and that it provides all these different opportunities to either, help support you as you're looking for your first couple of jobs, to shining a light on different opportunities for people that don't know about the different pathways that you can take in international affairs. I mean, I certainly didn't, and that was one of the driving forces behind starting the organisation, to being able to provide a platform and, a platform for emerging scholars and analysts to become a fellow, which is not something that most people get at the beginning of their career. And it's really important to, have a title and have a platform to be able to develop your own expertise and
build your self-confidence.
And build your self-confidence. And it also helps you, it provides you an in with other organisations because they see that you've got that, that title. So I think, the organisation grew so quickly that basically what we've been doing for the last couple of years has been really trying to just consolidate that growth and maintain what we do, so that everything we do is done to the best of our abilities. I see so many other organisations, they start all these different initiatives and stuff, but they very quickly
It loses momentum.
It loses momentum, and then it's really hard to try and sustain all of that. And I know firsthand how much work goes into all of that, particularly when you're staffed entirely by volunteers. Myself included. So I've really tried to make sure that we have a focus on really consolidating that and making sure that we have those, really boring, procedures and systems and ways of operating in place, but that are actually really fundamental to making sure that you run a successful organisation and provide successful services.
Yeah, and not only that, you're also teaching the young Australians who are a part of the organisation how an organisation is run and how they'll also be working in the workforce after they leave.
Absolutely.
Now, we're having this chat on International Women's Day, and Mercedes, you're a woman.
Yes.
And I'd be very interested to hear from you. What's your experience been like as a woman in international affairs? I think in the past, the whole field of international affairs has been male dominated. Lots of people in senior positions have not been women, although I'm so pleased that there's a woman at the head of DFAT. So would you like to just talk about or reflect on your experience as a young and now more mature woman in international affairs?
Thanks, Hayley.
Less young to be less young.
Look, I think that's a really great question. This International Women's Day is certainly coming at a pivotal time for us in Australia, but also around the world and the Indo-Pacific as well. You're absolutely correct that international affairs has always been very much a male-dominated space. And I think as a young woman, although I don't know if I can call myself that young anymore, but certainly as a young woman working in this space, I've seen a lot of change over the last 5 or 6 years. There's certainly much more emphasis placed on making sure that there's a diversity of people in a range of different positions and that women's voices are being actively sought out. I remember 5 or 6 years ago, all male panels were just the norm at think tanks and across the sector, and there are still too many males, but it is really good to see that almost all organisations now are trying to take steps to make sure that there's a blanket policy against all male panels, and I think that's really important to help promote and elevate the next generation of women across the spectrum of international affairs. And in some areas that's really easy, in others not so much. It's a lot easier, I think, in areas like aid and development rather than defence contestability. I think there's still work to be done in a lot of those areas, but that work
will never stop.
It will never stop, and it is really good to see that people are making proactive choices to help elevate women in this space.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've had a similar experience in terms of recognising progress in my time working in defence and security and international affairs, just being in Canberra and attending events where In the past, Q&A would be just a free-for-all, and often a lot of women wouldn't put their hand up for whatever reason. But now I've noticed that moderators on panels are saying it would be very good to have diversity in the questions, really encourage women in the crowd to ask a question, which is interesting, like actually calling women out to say, if you have a question and you're a woman, we'd like to hear from you, which is different to the past, and hopefully will start to generate this kind of cultural shift where women are asking more questions and not afraid to be the first to ask a question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really great example, because it's not, you're right, it's not just about making sure that there's gender equality in the workforce. It's also about making sure that all the ways that gender intersects is being examined. Sorry, that doesn't make any sense.
No, but I hear what you're saying, that, it permeates all areas. It's not just the workforce, but it's how you interact in a social setting, whether it's academia or in the workplace or the home. Absolutely.
It's about making sure that you are identifying opportunities for women in the workforce to contribute, to provide a platform, that you are actively looking out to make sure that women know that their voices are valued and encouraged. It's about, even at a micro level, making sure that you're just being cognizant of, you're sitting in a team meeting and it's only the men that are speaking, that you're creating space so that women also, and that's a really common one that I see very often, and it's really great to see males and other women making sure that women's voices are encouraged.
Now, Young Australians in International Affairs, is it doing anything in particular to mark International Women's Day this year?
Yeah, so I'm really proud that Young Australians in International Affairs provides lots of different platforms for, the next generation of women to get involved in international affairs. And an initiative that we've run now for the third year to celebrate International Women's Day is to publish a list of young women to watch in international affairs. So this year, the list started in 2019, and it came about because I saw, I think it was on LinkedIn or Twitter or something like that, a former colleague of mine getting recognised for her contributions in her industry as part of some awards for women. And I thought, it's astounding that we don't have anything similar to recognise Australian women working across the spectrum of international affairs. Luckily, being the CEO of an organisation means that, you can actually...
you can pull some strings.
You can pull some strings and you can actually, get initiatives like that off the ground. And so we did. So we launched this Young Women to Watch in International Affairs list. And basically, it's an annual list that's published on International Women's Day each year. And it provides a spotlight on women under 35 working across the spectrum of international affairs, and provides a spotlight on their achievements and contributions, because international affairs remains overwhelmingly a male-dominated space, and is so important to recognise, these absolute trailblazers. I'm, looking at the list this year, I was just so impressed by the hundreds of nominations we received, and going through and trying to narrow it down to just 20 was absolutely impossible. So we increased it to 25, which was still pretty impossible. But, there are some incredible women who just fill me with so much hope and inspiration that, we are going to, see some change in the years to come. And yeah, I find it a really inspiring list. And so that went live today. So I encourage everyone to have a look. Yeah, please do.
And usually what I do to end these little chats is, just to keep people listening, I ask for an unusual or weird, wonderful story about something that's happened to you in your past, or something that you reflect back on in your career and you think, geez, I really wish I knew that, 12, 15 years ago. So when you look back at, how far you've come, from South Australia and, your time now in Canberra, is there any particular moment or story that comes to mind that you reflect back on?
I'm not sure about any particular moment or story. I mean, I was doing a similar exercise quite recently with a friend because it's very easy to, when you're reflecting about your career, thinking about what you could have done differently, or, thinking about, if I'd made different choices, where would I be, etc. And my friend was like, imagine that you were, your 16-year-old self and reflecting on where you are today. What do you think your 16-year-old self would say? And I think that was quite a defining moment, because I thought, actually, I guess if I was 16 and saw where I was today, I'd be pretty happy with myself and proud of all that I've done and achieved. And, that's not a reflection that I, often make. So I think that was quite a useful exercise to have that bit of introspection. I guess a lesson or advice that I would give to my younger self. My career has certainly not been linear. I, started this not-for-profit when I was 23, and then it took me a while to get into the workforce. And, I started working for a think tank, then I went to work in the private sector, and then I ended up working for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So I kind of, always felt like I had done things in reverse to how they were meant to have been done, or, something like that, and compared myself to friends that had kind of done things a little bit differently.
It's hard not to compare yourself to other people that your peers.
Yeah, it is really hard. And I think it's only now that I'm really realizing that, no one's career is linear, and all of those diverse experiences make up, who you are. And I think that if it hadn't been for all of those different experiences and, even, starting up my own organization and putting so much time and energy into that over the years, I certainly wouldn't have the skill set that I have today, or, the diverse perspectives that I bring to my current day job. So, yeah, I definitely think your career is a marathon, not a sprint. And I used to hate it when people would say that to me. I'd be like, it's easy for you to say.
And also, I don't like marathons.
Also, I hate marathons. That's right.
I really wish it was a sprint.
Right?
/ a gentle walk.
A gentle walk, yep. A stroll. But I've really come to appreciate just how sound of advice that really is. And I think, that's really useful to anyone, whether at their the beginning of their career or whether they're a bit more established. Don't compare yourself to others. Every opportunity, every experience is an opportunity, and will provide you with, invaluable skills or experiences that you wouldn't otherwise have gotten. And, all of those can be transferred to what you do next. So, yeah.
Mercedes, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, and I think that people will really take a lot of key messages from your career experiences. Thinking about would you be proud of yourself back when you were 16 is a really good one, because I think day to day you're always reflecting on every mistake you made that day, when actually if you go back to yourself when you're in high school and look at the achievements you've made, they're really remarkable, and you're a fantastic example of someone who's ambitious and proactive and has really made a huge difference in a lot of people's lives. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Hayley. That's so sweet. Thanks very much.